Well, those guys who believe that they are the rightful rulers of a global fiefdom believe that one way or another, mankind has to have something that he's shit scared of. And generally that's war. But in the absence of war, they need something else. And this report looks at a number of other possibilities. But let me just read you this. Credibility, in fact, lies at the heart of the problem of developing a political substitute for war. The most ambitious and unrealistic space project cannot of itself generate a believable external menace. It has been hotly argued that such a menace would offer the last, best hope of peace. That's the threat of an alien invasion they're talking about here. By uniting mankind against the danger of destruction by creatures from other planets from outer space. They go on. Nevertheless, an effective political substitute for war would require alternate enemies, some of which might seem equally far-fetched in the context of the current war system. It may be, for instance, that gross pollution of the environment can eventually replace the possibility of mass destruction by nuclear weapons as the principal apparent threat to the survival of the species. Poisoning of the air and of the principal sources of food and the water supply is already well advanced. 1967. And at first glance would seem promising in this respect. It constitutes a threat that can be dealt with only through social organisation and political power. But from present indications, it will be a generation to a generation and a half before environmental pollution, however severe, will be sufficiently menacing on a global scale to offer a possible political basis for solution. Mount Herman, this is where the Watchers were deposited. Now, Mount Herman sits at a very, very interesting location on this planet. It actually sits at 33.53 degrees north of the equator and 33.53 degrees east of the 0 degree meridian. Now, when you go to Google Video, check this out, you'll find that that actually isn't correct. Because you have to take into account the adjustment that the 0 degree meridian was moved in 1886 from Paris to London. So were these guys trying to hide something? But when you make the adjustment for that move from Paris, it was called the Rose Line, Roslin, the Rose Line, to London, you come up with 33.53 degrees. Now this is a very, very interesting, and of course there is absolutely a connect between the 33 degrees and the 33 degrees in Freemasonry and the mystery schools. The Earth is 21,600 nautical miles in circumference, and of course that's 360 degrees. So when you take the equation, you take 33.53 degrees divided by 360 multiplied by 21,600, guess what you come up with? 2,012 nautical miles. So Mount Herman, the exact place where the Watchers were deposited X number of years ago, sits at 2,012 nautical miles north of the equator and east of the 0 degree meridian. So these guys, they don't know for sure. They don't know for sure. But let me tell you right now, they are scared shitless that this might be right, and that their time in the ascendancy on this planet is coming to an end. You remember that the Israelis launched an attack on southern Lebanon under the pretense of one of their soldiers being kidnapped. Well, I knew what was going to happen. I knew exactly. I mean, it was so predictable for me. They were going to take the land up to the Litani River and make sure they effectively controlled all the area around Mount Hermon, which today is controlled by the UN. The Israelis ran hundreds of sorties and dropped these cluster bombs in that whole area, making that whole area around Mount Hermon completely uninhabitable. Because if anybody obviously drives over these or walks over these little bomblets, I mean, you lose a limb. So, I mean, obviously the Zionist agenda is very clearly spelled out on their flag. It's one of only 2 flags in the world that has territorial ambitions encoded into it. The other one is Southern Ireland, by the way. But the Israeli flag, you have the Star of David, which is the Zionist symbol. It's not a symbol of Judaism. It's the Zionist symbol. And the 2 blue stripes above and below represent the 2 rivers, the Euphrates and the Nile. The determination of the Zionists to re-establish Greater Israel. But of course there's a few other people who have something to say about that.